Let me honor your death wish.
Alright, what's up guys, it's Roku back with the Darius content that you need to crush your ranked games. And today we have a bit of an interesting video because I've made a lot of videos on what you should be building, right? My season 11 item guide, my full, Darius guide season 10, and I generally like to give you guys a lot of information on what you guys should be building, right? But it's been happening all the time. But what I'm about to say is that sometimes I get people asking me hey, what do you think about Blade of the Ruined King last season? Or people just come up to me and tell me about items that they think would work on Darius, but it's very, very obvious that that item would never work on Darius, right? So I'm going to be using this video to explain what not to build on Darius, right? Before, I've just named items that you should be building, but this video should really make sure that you understand the structure of your build and also what you need in here and what you need out of here, right? So without further ado, let's just get right into it. So before we get into what you should be avoiding and not and whatnot, I'm going to be explaining to you what the structure of your build should be, right? The formula of a Darius build. We're assuming that boots do not count, right? You either rush your boots, get it after your strike breaker, whatever, right? Boots don't count. The formula applies to 5 items, right? So your first item is always going to be your mythic, okay? So get your mythic first, and like I explained in other videos, most of the time it's Strikebreaker. The next item we're going to get is our Sterex Gauge, right? You need Sterex Gauge in every single Darius build possible. It is impossible to survive in team fights without Sterex Gauge. This item is amazing, right? And it's unavoidable on this champion because of how much survivability it gives you in team fights. The bloodless healing, the lifeline, the shield that stacks up with every single, rage stack. It's amazing, right? This item is going to save you a lot, and it's going to make a difference in a lot of fights. So always, always, always get Sterex Gauge, okay? This is the first part of our build, right? And you should be around level 11 by the time you complete these 2 items, right? And now we get to the part of the build where we can start, changing things up, right? These first 2 items are mostly just going to be the same every single game. Your boots change according to the game, right? But this is just there as a placeholder. So our third item is what I call our flex item, right? Because this item can either be a damage focused item or it can be straight up like a tank item, right? So if you're in a situation where you need anti-heal, this third item is filled with Kempunk Chainsword, right? Let me just reorder it a bit so it's better to illustrate, I guess. So yeah, let's say you're up against healing. This third item is Kempunk Chainsword, or if you have Mordekaiser on the enemy team, Silver Mirror Dawn, right? If you are very fed and are looking to carry the game, you can get Death Stance. If you're up against a lot of tanks and have to, basically just out-survive them all, Black Cleaver, right? There's a lot damage option you can get into this. Coincidentally, not coincidentally, but also incidentally, if you need to tank up as soon as possible, you can also go any tank item for this slot, right? You can go your Thornmail, you can go if you have Bramble, right? Go your Thornmail, you can go your Force of Nature. Spear Visage is always good if you pair it with Gargoyle Stoneplate. If you're inting, you can go Warm Monks Gargoyles to get as much stats as possible. You can also go tank items in this slot, right? You can go a quick Gargoyles Rush, for example, if they have Fed AP and AUD damage sources, right? You can go anything, right? Then, after our third slot, which is the flex slot, we have 2 more item slots for tank items. Only tank items. No damage, okay? So we can just round off our build with, Spirit Visage to pair with the Gargoyles and maybe a Randuin's in case of, their Fed crit carry, or a Yone or a Yasuo or something, right? So this is our formula. Mythic item, Strikebreaker, Sterex Gauge, Flex, either damage, focus, or full tank, and then 2 tank items, right? This is our formula. You want to do this every single game, right? No exceptions, okay? Now, what do we want in these items and what we want not in these items, right? I'm going to explain to you what to avoid, basically. So first off, the most obvious thing, right? I just shouldn't even mention this. No AP. no AP allowed, right? This is not a champion that works with AP in any capacity. So never, never, never build ability power. If you're building ability power, you're trolling. That's it, right? Support items. You mostly just don't want to build support items either because, like, you know, they're cheap, but like support items are generally bad stats, right? Support items, like, their utility is bad stats, but the active or whatever they give is very, very useful, right? So they changed Mikhail's name, but like Mikhail's, it has a lot of bad stats. Like, it's just 50 magic resist basically. The rest of it is just worthless. So it's 2,000 gold for 50 magic resist. But the active on it, which is basically like a QSS for someone else, is amazing, right? For a support champion. But we're not a support champion. We're a carry champion. We're a fighter champion. We need stats on Darius. So the only support item you can even think about going is Knight's Vow, okay? And even then, it's like, it's only 400 health. It's not even that good. You only want to get Knight's Vow if you're basically just inting and you want to tell yourself that you deserve the free win. But because, you know, you're going to put it on your Fed ADC or whatever and just, you know, have them carry you. But like, that's only if you're just inting and you know, like, that doesn't matter what you build at that point because you're just useless, right? So for the most part, stay away from these support items, right? So these two items, you don't want to get them at all. The game is asking me to FF because I'm going AFK trying to explain these to you guys. Okay, so we're done with our like items that you want to avoid completely. Now let's get into, like, you know, shaping our build up to so it's more uniform and more like neat, right? One big thing with all the items we're going to get is that they have to have some sort of tank stats, right? Whatever item you're going to get on Darius, any item, has to make you tankier, okay? Whether it gives you armor, whether it gives you HP, right? It has to make you tankier. And don't tell me that, oh, I'm going to go Ravenous because it's Omnivamp makes you tankier. No, it does not, right? Omnivamp is useless. I'll get that into after what I explain this. But basically, if you've realized, every single item that I ever recommend has some sort of tank stats, right? So Strikebreaker has the HP and the movement, which kind of helps in a way, but we're not going to count that. So Strikebreaker has the HP, Starax has the HP, the shield, Cleaver has health, you know, this has health, Silvery Dawn has health. The most damaging item we have in our build is Death Dance, but even then, this item has the armor, and it has the Ignore Pain passive, which is great against AD, right? Every single thing you're ever gonna buy needs to make you tankier than you were before you bought it, right? So this qualifies Blade of the Rune King, Ravenous Hydra, Ginsu's, all of these marksman items, all of these assassin items, right? So just, you know, you're gonna need either HP or resistances in every single item that you buy, right? This is just for the damage items, by the way. Tank items, we already know that these tank items just tank us up. This is basically to tell you, like, you know, if you're, like, you know, just approaching the items and you see that it doesn't have anything to make it tankier, then just stay away from it, right? This should help you kind of decide on your own what's better and what's not better, right? As I mentioned before, Omnivamp, or Lifesteal, is horrible on Darius, right? I've made a whole video about this before, but, like, that video was just a clip from the middle of my stream, so I couldn't really represent the argument very well, right? So I'm going to try again. Basically, Lifesteal, and Omnivamp for that matter, is very, very, very bad on Darius, right? And generally speaking, you do not want to get Lifesteal on champions that build a lot of tank items, okay? Because, like, when you have a lot of health, that means you're going to be frontline, right? You're taking a lot of damage, you know? And, like, you'll never be able to lifesteal enough to make up for what you lose, right? You'll never be able to make up enough in terms of lifesteal or Omnivamp, right? Like, an Oxymite, like, that's 1,200 damage, and you have, like, you know, let's say 30% Omnivamp. Like, that's basically 400 health. That 400 health is nothing, right? That's one auto attack, you know? That's one ability. Like, that's just nothing, right? The Q that Darius has already, and the Triumph that we have here, these are not lifesteal. These are heals, right? This is health, but this is heal based on your missing health. Triumph is healing based on your missing health, right? There's a very big difference between heal and lifesteal, right? Because lifesteal is directly related to the amount of damage you do, right? So it's basically irrelevant until you get your Noxium Might. Heal is always relevant. Always, 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 right? So, like, these healings give you the amount of health you need when you need it, right? Let's say you're at, like, let's say this is the build we have, right? You'll probably have more health than this, but let's say we have 3,000 health, right? And we're at, like, 10 HP. 1 Q is gonna heal us up 450, right? Just 1 Q, right? If you hit it on one person, it's gonna heal us up more than 30% Omnivamp will heal us on a max stacked ultimate, right? Now imagine we're in level 16. You have more HP, people do way more damage. Do you want, like, the Q that's going to give you more consistent healing when you need it? Or do you want to sacrifice half of your build for Omnivamp that's not even going to help you, right? The Omnivamp will never be enough, right? The Q is enough, right? A full 3-stack Q heals you, like, basically up to 60% of your HP, right? You'll never get that much healing with Lifesteal. So, Lifesteal is, like, basically useless because you're sacrificing tankiness to go for these Omnivamp, for these lifesteal items, and it's like, you know, when you go for these items, you're going to be way squishier than you used to be, right? When you go for, like, you know, let's say you give up, you know, Resolve or Sorcery to go for Ravenous Hunter, and then you go for Ravenous Hydra, right? So you're sacrificing so much to go for those items, and, like, it's basically useless because you're so squishy they're gonna one-shot you, and, like, you know, it's like if you just learn how to use your Q, you're basically already healing up a lot, right? So lifesteal is a complete waste of money, okay? So Omnivamp is a waste of money. Lifesteal is completely useless. Lifesteal is completely useless. Whereas like Omnivamp is bad because it kind of messes up our build. Lifesteal is actually useless in pretty much every scenario, right? By lifesteal, I mean, like, from Bork, basically. The one that just applies to your auto attacks. We know that Darius is a more ability-reliant champion when it comes to bigger fights. So, like, it's basically just a wasted stat, right? So never, never, never get lifesteal, right? Always get, like, away from those kinds of items, right? So with those two guidelines, we've pretty much evened out our build, and now we kind of understand what we're going for here, right? So, like, all these assassin items are pretty much worthless, because they all, like, they rarely make you tankier, right? Well, some of our bruiser items are in here, but, like, you know, you're not going to go the collector, because it doesn't make us tankier. Cyril doesn't make us tankier, we're not going to go for it, right? So these two restrictions, or these one guideline, one restriction, kind of evens out, like, it kind of removes most, like, horrible items from our build. The third sort of guideline I want to suggest is no lethality, right? We do not want lethality on Darius, right? Because, like, with Darius, it's like, you don't need lethality. Because first off, like, a big portion of our damage, like, 20-30% of our damage is true damage anyway, right? So that lethality is not gonna help this true damage at all. So that's a wasted stat. And even if you are in a situation like where, like, basically lethality helps you one-shot people before you get Noxium Might, right? Now, I don't want to point out how stupid this is, but why would we want to increase our damage before Noxium Might when we already have damage, right? We already have damage in our kit. We don't need to improve the damage of this part. We need to, like, basically make it so that we can survive this part, so that when we do get Noxium Might, we can actually use it, right? So, like, that also goes along with what I meant by you don't want to go items that's just damage, items that make you tankier with HP or resistances, because, like, our whole point of building is to make sure that we're tanky enough, we're mobile enough to survive until we get our Noxium Might, right? That's pretty much all this is, right? Now, we do need some damage, right? We need some AD in Darius so that we can actually, you know, AD attack speed are very, very useful in helping us, like, you know, get 5 stats quickly and actually one-shot people with Noxium Might instead of just almost killing them. But, like, having some tankiness in every single item is, like, your key thing here, right? You have to have it. So to round up, that everything has to make you tanky somehow, whether it's either HP or MR or armor. It has it has to have one of these three things, right? You cannot ever buy lethality or also crit. Also don't buy crit because it's also troll. No lethality, no crit, no omnivamp, no lifesteal, right? So with these rules, we've gotten most items out of our way, right? Most things now, we kind of like, if you just heard these three rules and you don't know anything about Darius items, you kind of understand what to stay away from, right? For the most part, you're not going to be messing around with any of these, lethality items or assassin items. You're not going to touch these ADC items, like, who needs Bloodthirster, these ADC items are also horrible. And, like, you're mostly going to be staying in these two spots, the fighter items and the tank items section, right? So, yeah, to recap, your mythic item, Strikebreaker, your Sterax Gauge, second item, Flex, this is the third item. It can go either, like, some sort of adapty sort of damage item, or if we're fed Death Dance. You can also go tank item for the third flex option, in case you need to tank up ASAP. You need to go gargoyles fast, or you need to go some sort of like quick randoms ASAP because the Yasuo's one-shotting you. And then 2 tank items, right? The last option, the last spot, let's say you're in hyper late game, right? 6 items, everyone 6 items. You can sell your boots for Dead Man's Plate, right? Because, like, selling boots on Darius was never actually a thing, like in the previous seasons, because like the boots actually give you movement speed, and without the movement speed, you're pretty much a turtle. But with the Strikebreaker like mythic passive of 3% more move speed, plus Dead Man's giving us move speed, you can actually kind of like give up boots in your last item, and then go for a Dead Man's, right? This is also like, if you've been watching my games, I don't really go Dead Man's anymore in my 3rd, 4th, or 5th items because I always wanted to be there as an option to replace for my 6th item. I usually just go for like randoms if I need armor, basically, or like Thornmail if I was up against a Fiora in lane, because honestly, you only build Bramble against Fiora most of the time, or like Bork users. So if I was up against the Fiora lane or something, Thornmail, I rarely go Dead Man's Plate before the last like item, right? By last I mean like instead of the boots, right? So like the runes that I've already explained, right? All the formula, what you should avoid, those are applying for 100% of the time. Here is the one rule that applies for like 90% of the time, right? You might get into a 1 in 100 game where you have to cross this rule. But this rule is basically this. If you're going for a tank item, make sure you go for something that makes you tanky in 2 ways at least, right? So it has to be either health or armor, or health magic resist, or armor and magic resist, right? Never go for something that makes you tanky in just one way, right? So something like Warmogs is rarely good because it just gives you HP, which is never good, right? Something like Frozen Heart is not good because it just gives you armor, which, like, we know it's not good, right? So, like, always go for something that makes you tanky in 2 ways, right? And if you have been watching my content, you can kind of tell the situations where you might need to break this rule. So if you're up against true damage, right, like Mastery or something, Frozen Heart is amazing. If you're inting but you have to get tanky ASAP, then Warmogs combined with Gargoyle is great for just filling your champion up with stats. So like those are the situations where you might want to break that rule, basically, right? So yeah. That's like the one rule that I'm giving you, but it's like, try to only follow this rule if like, try to follow it into 99% of the games, and try to think about like the situation you're in, because sometimes you might need to break this one rule, right? One item that I kind of forgot to talk about in my item guide is Abyssal Mask, but basically treat this item like an armor paired item, right? AKA, we don't need it, right? So just stay away from this item. The stats on it are decent, right? It's a good amount of MR. The HP is a little bit low, but what can we do? But it's not good because the active of it is not very useful, right? It's a tank fighting item, but we already have an amazing tank fighting item, Black Cleaver, right? We don't need that, right? And with Cleaver, instead of the stats being okay with us, stats are amazing with us, right? Cleaver has amazing stats, It's just not good into a lot of games where the enemy doesn't have tanks, but Cleavers are anti-tank item. Not that Abyssal Mask shit. So yeah, anyways, guys, that was it for this video. For a quick tip, if you want to practice these restrictions, write them down on a notepad or like some sort of paper somewhere and just follow them in game until you organically pick the right items, right? But this is just a tip for practice. You know, if you think you can already handle these rules from just watching the video, then you know you're better than I do. So yeah, this was it. That was it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more Darius content. I'll see you guys next round. Peace out.